Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're looking at a pretty significant policy shift from the Department of Justice. It's about health care for transgender inmates.
That's right. A topic with a lot of different facets.
Definitely. We've got a few different sources to dig into. The official DOJ press release, an opinion piece that supports the change, some info on other related DOJ actions.
And some legal context, too.
Right. And our goal here, our sort of mission for you, the listener, is to get beyond just the headlines. We want to understand the core arguments, the different viewpoints.
And what this tells us about bigger principles in the U.S. system, right? Federal power versus state power, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about the ideas underneath. So let's dive in.
Okay.
First up, the DOJ's own rationale. The press release talks about correcting a, quote, manipulation of the legal system. What's that really getting at?
Well, the core idea seems to be that the previous administration went too far, that they imposed federal requirements on states about specific medical procedures.
Specifically things like gender-affirming surgeries.
Yes, exactly. And the opinion article we looked at really emphasizes this principle of state sovereignty.
Okay, state sovereignty, we hear that term a lot. How does it connect here?
The argument is that states traditionally have a lot of control over their own affairs, things like running prisons, managing healthcare within those prisons. And this view suggests that having the federal government mandate specific, potentially controversial medical treatments across all states disrupts that balance.
So the idea is that states are better placed to decide.
That's what the opinion piece argues. It says states are better equipped to reflect the values and priorities of their own communities. It mentions local voters and legislatures having a stronger voice.
Right. But what about federal standards? Doesn't federal law sometimes step in to ensure basic rights? How does that balance out?
That's the tension, isn't it? The argument here prioritizes that division of powers, suggesting that uniform federal mandates in this area might be an overstep. It's framed as respecting the diversity of views across different states.
Okay, I see the argument. Now, the opinion piece also brings up money. Fiscal responsibility.
That's another big pillar of the argument.
How does the cost of gender-affirming surgery play into this?
Well, the piece points out that these surgeries can be expensive, and it contrasts that cost with what it calls underfunded basic medical and mental health services already in prisons.
So it's a question of priorities, like should states focus limited funds on these surgeries versus other needs?
Sort of. The argument is that states need the flexibility to manage their budgets and prioritize urgent healthcare needs. The idea is that a federal mandate for potentially high-cost procedures could strain resources needed elsewhere in the system.
Is there a counter-argument mentioned, like the potential cost of not providing care, maybe lawsuits or long-term health issues?
The opinion piece doesn't really go deep into that side of it. Its focus is squarely on the immediate budget implications and the state's need for flexibility in spending.
Gotcha. Okay, another point raised is this concern about policy by litigation. What does that mean here?
It means the feeling that the previous requirements for transgender health care in prisons didn't come about through, say, state laws being passed democratically. Instead, the argument is they resulted more from court rulings and federal pressure, things decided by judges or federal agencies, not elected state representatives.
So the DOJ action is being framed as a kind of reset, pushing the debate back to state legislatures.
Exactly. A course correction is the phrase used that put these decisions back in the legislative sphere, where theoretically they reflect more direct public input state by state.
Makes sense. More democratic accountability, potentially.
That's the perspective presented, yes.
Yeah.
Empowering citizen voices and state-level representation.
Now, let's be really clear on something the opinion piece stresses. This policy change, it's not a ban on transgender healthcare in prisons, is it?
No, absolutely not. That's a critical distinction they make. The article explicitly says it does not ban transgender healthcare in prisons.
Okay, so what does it do then?
It essentially gives the power back to the states. It allows individual states to assess and balance individual inmate needs with institutional capabilities and public sentiment.
So states decide the how and when and to what extent.
That's the idea. The opinion piece frames this as leading to a more democratic and inclusive process because each state can tailor its approach.
Okay. Now, our sources also pointed to some other recent DOJ actions. How might those connect? There was a settlement with a towing company in California.
Right. That involved the Service Member Civil Relief Act. The connection drawn is that the DOJ presented it as enforcing federal law, but also correcting a situation they saw as maybe overreach.
So similar theme, reining in perceived federal overstep.
That seems to be the parallel the source material suggests. It's presented as part of a pattern.
And there was also mention of a task force on anti-Christian bias and support for a church land use case.
Yes. And again, the source material links these actions. It suggests they're part of a broader DOJ effort to tackle what they see as ideological imbalances in how federal power has been used, and maybe to prioritize things like religious liberty.
So it could be seen as consistent with the transgender healthcare policy shift, addressing perceived biases from previous administrations.
That's the connection being made, yes. Framing it as part of a larger strategy to rebalance things according to their priorities.
Okay, interesting to see those potential connections. Let's zoom out a bit to the bigger picture. Legal, historical context.
Yeah, it's important. First, you've got the bedrock principle of federalism. This whole debate is, in many ways, a classic federalism debate about dividing power between Washington and the states.
And that's been going on since the founding, basically.
Pretty much. And the legal side keeps evolving. We know there have been court cases like Edmo v. Corizon back in 2019, where courts did rule in favor of inmates needing gender-affirming care. So judicial views aren't static.
Right. The landscape shifts.
It does. And you also have things like the Federal Bureau of Prisons guidelines, which exist, but, those can be revised too, reflecting policy changes like this one.
So this DOJ shift isn't happening in a vacuum. It's part of that ongoing negotiation between federal authority and state rights, and legal precedents can point in different directions over time.
Precisely. It's another chapter in that ongoing story.
Okay, so let's try to summarize the core arguments we've unpacked from the sources supporting this DOJ policy shift.
Sure.
It seems to boil down to 1, reinforcing state sovereignty, letting states decide. 2, fiscal responsibility, allowing states to manage their own budgets and prioritize spending. 3, concerns about policy coming from courts or federal pressure rather than state legislatures, right? The policy by litigation point. And 4, the idea that this allows states to balance various factors: inmate needs, state resources, public opinion at the local level.
Yeah, that sums up the rationale presented pretty well.
This has been, well, definitely illuminating, trying to really get inside the why behind this policy based on the materials we have.
Absolutely. It touches on some really fundamental questions about how the U.S. system works or how different people think it should work.
And hopefully, for you listening, this deep dive has helped clarify the different arguments and principles involved here.
It's definitely complex. You see how interpreting core ideas like federalism or rights can lead down very different paths.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to mull over. We've talked a lot about this balance between federal and state power. How do you see these kinds of principles playing out in other tricky social issues we're facing?
Yeah, that's a great question.
What does it mean for a really diverse country, with different values state by state, to navigate these conflicts? Think about the long-term effects of shifts like this on individual rights, sure, but also on just, a national unity.
Lots to consider there.
Definitely food for thought. We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable perspective. Thanks for tuning in.